Hello, this is Kevin, and welcome to my tutorial on the templates coding assignment for the Easy University project. In this coding assignment corresponds pretty closely to Chapter 4 of the Pinkham book, but not exactly. Uh, let's talk a little bit about the differences. Uh, in the Pinkham chapter 4, what he does is he does a lot of templates, okay, more than we're going to do. And he doesn't wire them up so you can test them. So you probably remember from when we were doing the Django Girls tutorials at the beginning of the course that that there's a flow through the Django technology, and in order to bring up a page, you need to configure a URL entry in urls.py, and that has to correspond with a view in views.py, and that view has to have a code in it that essentially loads the template that we're going to make. And so on one hand, we're not going to do quite so many templates as Pinkham does in chapter 4. But on the other hand, we're going to peek ahead a chapter or so, and we're going to practice how to wire these things up, because my point of view is whenever you add code, you ought to be able to test it. Okay, so untested code is pretty close to worthless, maybe even worse than worthless, because it gives the appearance of progress without actual progress. Okay, so we're going to do fewer templates. We're just going to do the lists for each of the tables. We have 6 of them, but we're going to wire them up such that we're able to get the pages to fire up, and we're able to test them. Okay, so where did we leave the application? Well, I have it here. We left the application where we had created the model classes for all 6 of our tables: semester, course, instructor, student, section, registration. So we had all of those, and we had wired them up with the admin application. So when we go to when we crank up the server and we go to the root URL and we log into admin, and the login that we're all using to test this is a tester, and the password is lowercase secret in parens. Well, then we can see that we've added the course info app to the admin application, and that we are able to do pretty well full function CRUD activities on all 6 of our tables. So we can see our courses, and we can see our instructors, and we can see our registrations, and our sections, and our semesters, and our students. And having done that, now we're going to really build a custom app that'll do a lot of what we see here. What we see here isn't as useful to the user community for a couple reasons. One is you have to log in with kind of admin authority to use it. Okay, and we don't want to give everybody admin authority. Two, it's not as adapted to to the work activities that I think our typical users are going to do. Particularly the way that they do registrations, I think is going to be a little different by the time we're done. So we want a custom app that kind of has a lot of overlap with what we can do with the admin app, but goes a lot farther. And certainly one that enforces the business rules of this application more extensively than we could do with the admin app. All right, so let's close that. So we're going to create templates. Okay, so let's see where that's going to go. Okay, I'm going to close all these windows and I'll be right back. Okay, so if we're going to be creating templates primarily, we're going to need a place to put them. Okay, and when we created our course info app, it gave us a templates directory. Okay, and just because of the conventions of this platform, within the templates directory, we're going to add another directory called course info. And this might seem a little redundant, but it's just the way the architecture of Django works. Okay, and then our individual templates are going to be under templates course info. And the first one that we want to create is we want to create a list of instructors. What we're going to be doing in this tutorial for the coding exercise is we're going to be creating the lists associated with each of the tables. So we're going to begin with the instructor. We're going to make instructor list. So within this subdirectory, I want to right click and say I want a new, and templates have an HTML extension the way that we're doing it, and ours is going to be called course_list, and it's going to get a .html, which is what HTML5 files get. Okay, so what are we going to put in there? Okay, well, we're going to want to put enough code into our first of all, let's get rid of the HTML page. Why is that? Well, pretty soon what we're going to do is we're going to have a base page which is going to put out the skeleton of the overall HTML page, and this course list.html, this template file, is going to inherit from that. It's going to extend that base page. So I don't want to have too much of that skeletal code from the HTML page. But the other thing is in the short run, you can have kind of snippets of HTML code and you can display them in the browser, and the browser is pretty tolerant of that. Okay, so let's take a look at what content we would like to have. And this is what I'm going to do. Here's my content for the course list page. Okay, and it's pretty well done. I'm not going to have you watch me type here. So I want to have a title, a header that says instructor list, and I'm going to have a UL, an unordered list, a bulleted list. Okay, and within there, what I want to do is I want to have I want to generate a list of instructors. Okay, I'd also like the instructors, I'd like the text of each of these list items to be a link. And why is that? Well, it's pretty typical for these list pages to be, they're kind of indexes of all of whatever it is, instructors, semesters, or whatever. And the typical user interface is that each of the items on the list is a link to a detail page. So what we've done is we've created a UL. Within that we have these LIs. Okay, and let's not worry about the for and the in-for yet. Okay, so within the LI we have the beginning of the A element, sometimes called the anchor element, and we have a blank URL for the href. And why do we do that? Well, we could hand code the URL in a way that we think is going to correspond to the way we're going to be using, the way we're going to connect these things up. But it turns out that the URL functionality for Django, one of the things it's really good at is generating URLs for you on the fly. And of course, we're not going to learn that for a couple of chapters. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait. We're going to leave all these hrefs blank in all of our anchor tags. And then we're going to come back in a couple of coding assignments and we're going to fill in all the links. Okay, so what is going on in this inside the A tag? Well, what we're doing is we're listing the instructor name. Okay, so what we're going to do is every time through we're going to get a different instructor object. Okay, and we're going to, what we're saying is with this template tag, that we want to render the instructor object and not just a subset of it. We're not going to say we want to render the first name. We could say we want the instructor dot first name or in the instructor dot last name. If we just say instructor, what it does is it calls the string function, and we get that same kind of pretty rendering for the instructor that we were seeing when we were running the admin app. So that's how we do it here. We just use the name that's associated with the instructor object. Okay, so how are we going to get all these instructor objects? Well, we're going to be in a loop. So the loop is a part of the templating language, and it has for loops. Okay, so we can say for instructor in instructor list. So somehow this template is going to be passed a list of instructors called instructor list. That's actually going to come from the view. Okay, and then we're going to iterate over that list, and we're going to process each one at a time, and we're going to create a list item with a link where the text inside the link is the rendering that we get for the instructor when we call the string, which is last name, comma space, first name. Okay, so what's this? So we have a for and we have an in for, and they're in these kind of curly percent braces. Okay, that makes sense. That's just the syntax for the templating language. Okay, what about empty? Well, empty is a kind of an else. Okay, so it says if this object that you have here, this list object, is empty, then instead of doing this for loop, instead of doing this, we're going to render what's inside of this, what comes after the empty, just one time. So we're going to say there are currently no instructors available. Okay, does that look pretty good? Okay, so let's see if we can wire that up. Okay, so what do we have to do to wire that up? Well, the next thing we're going to need is a view. Okay, so let's go to views.py. We're working in the Course Info app. And let's open that up. And I'm going to bring over the code for the instructor list view. And again, I don't want you to watch me typing here, so we're going to copy these things kind of as they are, and then we're going to talk our way through. So let me do a couple of things. First of all, let's bring all of our imports in that we're going to need. Okay. All right, that's good. And we're going to need one more import. We refer to the models. Okay. So every time we import a model class, we're going to have to add to its import list. Okay, so this one is going to look like this. Okay, so what did we import? So we've got we have an import for render, an import for HTTP response, one for loader, and one for the instructor class. Okay, let's walk through. Let's make this code a little bigger. It's a little easier to read. Okay. So views are the kind of views that we're using now are based on functions. So this is a function-based view. Oh, sorry. Somehow I lost the end of my import there. Don't know how that happened. So functions get two blank lines before them. Okay, that's looking a little better. It's getting a gray squiggly line. Okay, and the name of the view is instructor list view. So pretty obvious naming. There's typically a correspondence between the name of the template and the name of the view that is going to cause the template to be rendered. Okay, so we say instructor list view, and it's going to be passed a request. Okay, now this is a part of the plumbing of web serving. Okay, what comes from the browser is called a request, and what we send back is called a response. So by getting the request passed in, we have the ability to pick things out of the request. Now, at this point, we're not going to pick very much out of the request, but someday we will. So this is the standard thing to do with your view. Okay, so what's the first thing that we do? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build a query set. So we're going to get a list of all the instructors, and we are going to put it in a variable that we call instructor list. And how do we do this? Well, we do a call using the instructor class, and we do an objects all, and that returns a list of instructor objects, and it returns all of them. Okay. Now we could filter this if we wanted to. We could go on and add additional code, but typically when we're doing all lists, we want a list of all. Now I have a little test code that I'm going to leave here and discuss later when we're testing, but it's a test version of that instruction that we just did. Okay, the next thing that we do is we have to find our template. So there's a template loader, and we're going to call get template on the loader, and we're going to load the instructor list.html template that's in course info. Okay, so in order to render a template, you need a template. You have to say what template. So we just did. The next thing you need is this thing called a context. Okay, and I just want to point out that this code is a little different from what you see in chapter 4 of the Pinkham book. In chapter 4, which was way back in Django 1.8, the contexts were represented by a special class called the context class, and you would call the constructor on the context class, and you would pass it a data structure that looks like this. Okay, it's a dictionary, right? So now, since by Django 1.11 this was true, we no longer have to use a special context class. The context is just a regular dictionary. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to take that comment out because we're going to clone these, and we don't want a whole module full of those comments. Okay, so what's in the context? Well, it's a dictionary, and the label for the entry is instructor list, and the value is a reference to our instructor list. Okay, this is how we get the data to pull out of we pull it out of the context when we're in the template. And now we have to get things rendered. So we call on the template object, we call the render method, and we passed it the context. So rendering takes a template and a context. Okay, well, how does it know what template it is? Well, we already loaded it up there. How does it know what context to use? Well, we passed it the context object. Okay, what did we get back from that? Right now we're getting back a string representation for the output of our page. And then how do we send it back to the browser? We return an HTTP response object that contains that output string. It's that easy. So are we ready to go yet? No, we're not quite ready to go yet. Okay, because we're not fully wired up. We need to make an entry in the URLs .py. So right now, our course info app doesn't have a URLs .py. And what we're eventually going to see in this application is as applications grow, they get big enough to have their own URL processor. So one day, not today, course info will have a URLs.py of its own. But for now, we just have one for the project. It's down in this trainer Kevin Easy University directory. So we're just going to use that. Again, we're not trying to emphasize the finer points of wiring these things up, because they're really going to cover more of that when we get to a further tutorial. Okay, so I've opened URLs .py for the overall project. And I just want to remind you that the approach that we use in Django 2.0 is, instead of using the URL function, we use the path function. And this is a difference between the code that we're doing here and the code that's in chapter 4 of the Pinkham book. But we were already doing this when we were doing the Django Girls tutorials, so it should be pretty straightforward. So what do we add? Well, let's look. We want a path that's going to allow us to go to the instructor list view. Okay, and what's that going to look like? It's going to look like this. Okay, I'm going to get rid of all this extra code up here because it's just kind of driving me crazy for right now. I guess some of it would be a proper module documentation, but for right now I think I kind of like it with the comment out of there. Okay, and so let's say we say path. So if we get instructor slash, just like before we were picking up admin slash and we were sending it to the admin site URLs, this actually does have a URLs .py for the admin app itself. But here, instead of forwarding it on to another URLs.py processor, we're just going to list the view. So we're going to say, if we've got this path, then we want to pass the request on to the instructor list view. Now we have to do an import to make that work. So what do we need to import? We just need to import instructor list view. So let's just add that. While we're here, we'll make this code a little bigger, a little easier to read. Okay, so let's add that import. Okay, and something I don't think I explained last time, but that I like to do is almost everything in Python that is a comma separated list is tolerant of you having a comma on the last entry. That wouldn't be good punctuation for publishing, but it turns out it's a nice way to have a list that you can add to without having to change 2 lines when you add the next thing. You don't have to add the comma to the last one. So we've got this, and our references to instructor list view have resolved. So we have the URL pattern entry, we have a view, we have a template. Let's see if we can get that to work. Okay, so we're just going to fire up the browser again. Now, one of the beautiful things about the Django development server is it monitors your code, and when some of your code changes, it loads the new code. This isn't a thing that production servers like Gunicorn, which we're eventually going to use. This isn't the thing that production servers do, but it's a real handy thing that this Django development server does. So we don't have to restart the server. We should be able to just click on the URL and fire it up. And we got a 404 because right now, if we just have the root URL, then we don't have any path string at all, and we don't have a rule that matches that yet. So we say, okay, I've got an entry for the path of admin. I have an entry for the path of instructor, but I don't have an empty path. Well, that's fine. We're going to solve that in another assignment. So that looks good. So when you come over here, you want to check that the path entry that you just added to the URL configuration, you want to check that it was actually there. And it's there. Very good. So let's add on, let's just say instructor slash, and it's not liking that. So we've got a problem. So it's not liking the loader pie. Well, I'm going to fix that, and I'll be back and explain what I did. Well, sorry guys, I did this exact same thing when I practiced this, so it's kind of funny. In the templates, okay, instead of calling my template instructor list, I somehow got turned around and called it course list. Well, that's not good. So let's figure that out. Let's highlight that, right click, refactor, rename, and let's say we want this file to be called instructor list. And let's refactor. And it's looking better there. So we're trying to load instructor list. We've imported model instructor. Let's go to the urls.py and make sure we have instructor list view. Well, let's hope that's better. I don't know if I've completely fixed or not, but let's go back and let's go to instructor. If I could spell, that'd be dangerous, huh? Instructor. Okay. Instructor. Don't know why that wasn't working. And there we are. So I just accidentally called the file the wrong thing. Typical mistake for me. I've done it twice today, but there we are. So what we have here is a fragment. Okay, is this a proper page? No. How do we know? Well, let's say that we want to view page source. Look, it's just an HTML fragment, but this is what we wanted. Okay, so we've got the list items with all 4 instructors with their names inside of the A or anchor elements, and we have an empty href for each one. So we're going to be rendering these as a link, but they're going to be dead in the page. Okay, so let's close this and go back. And let's click on the link to Dan Hall and Bill Qualls and me and Jane Scholar, and we're not going anywhere because in this assignment we don't hook them up. Okay, and also we haven't created the pages to hook them up to. These are going to be the detail pages, right? All right, well, that's good. It'd be nicer to have a proper HTML page. Would you agree? All right, so let's close this for now, and let's go back and look at instructorlist.html. Okay, and let's say, don't we really want this thing to invoke a some kind of a parent page? So in Django, what we typically do is we call the parent page, um, we call it base.html. Okay, so first of all, let's get a base.html page. So it's going to go right into course info. I realize if you looked at chapter 4, you're going to see that Pinkham has a pretty elaborate scheme. He's got 2 levels of parent pages. That's a little too complicated for me. Would you want to use that in some grand scheme? Yeah, I think that's fine. It's not a bad example of it. It's just really too complex for my current taste. So I'm going to say base, and it's going to add HTML. Okay. I called it the right thing this time. That's good. And I've given you a link to this page, fully finished, in your in the assignment for this week. So you should be able to download this base.html page. So instead of having you doing a bunch of coding, we're just going to go through it and make sure you understand it. Okay. So here's what I've given you, and let me make that a little bigger. Okay, and let's go up here. So we have a doctype HTML, a typical HTML5 document. We have an HTML element within that, lang en, to say this is the English version of it. Within the head element, we've got some things that we normally see. We've got a meta tag that says that we're using UTF-8 encoding, which is pretty much standard with Django. So that's what we want to do. Could you use a different encoding if you had a use case for it? Sure, you could. We have a title. The title of the page is using the base is going to be passed through to this block title. Okay, so every page that uses this base is going to pass through a string that is going to be plunked into the title by this block of code. Okay, do we expect it to ever render title is provided by inheriting templates? No, we don't, because we're always expecting a proper title block to be passed through. Okay, then we've got a couple of more meta tags having to do with cross-browser compatibility. We have an HTML5 shiv that has to do with cross-browser compatibility with IE. And this was all, I think I probably, a lot of this code was borrowed from the template that was used in the Pinkham book. So I've changed it, but that's where it got started. And now the contents in the body, right? So we have a header. Okay, in that we have the name of the system. So we have the name of the university, Easy University, and then the name of the system. That's what goes in the header for the page. Then we have a nav, which is eventually going to be a nav bar, but right now in the typical approach is that the nav is an unordered list. Okay, and we have an entry for each of our tables, all 6 of them: instructors, sections, courses, semesters, students, registration. Notice that we haven't populated the hrefs for the nav, and that's because we're going to come back once we learn how to use the full URL feature. We're going to put in some we're going to put in some Django shortcut code to populate the links, even though we could probably guess ahead and type in what those what the file names are going to be. The whole application would be more maintainable if we use the URL functionality that we're going to add here in a couple of weeks. Okay? And then we have the main. Okay, and in the main we've got this content block. You'll notice that this block has a name content, and the other block that we had that had the name of the page on it was up in title, and it had the name title. So that's how we can tell one block being passed to us from another block being passed to us, right? And this all of our content from our child page is going to be plunked in right here in place of this is the default content. Okay, and then we have a footer. So instead of having a bunch of copyright stuff, I've added some stuff. I typically put my courseware under Creative Commons attribution license, and so that's what the footer does. Okay, and that's the end of the footer and the end of the body and the end of HTML. Okay, so pretty straightforward stuff, but that's that. Now we've got to go back to the instructor list template and make it, I can do that, make it more robust than just being the snippet that it is. Okay, it's a snippet of HTML right now. Let's go and put all the code in for this page. Again, I'm just going to copy it in so you don't have to watch me type. Okay, so what have we done? Well, we've done the bulk of the code's the same. We've added this directive up here for the template processor that says that this template extends base.html in the course info directory. Okay, that's how it knows to have this page feed its content blocks to the base.html page. And this is what implements this page inheritance. Okay, and now we want to make sure that we populate the title block that we're passing. So we just give it the name instructor list, and then we take all the content that we have and we put that in a block called content, and that's how we pass in what we had before. What we had before is just what's inside the content block. Okay, and that should do it. So let's go back and test that and see if we can get a more user-friendly page. So we still, you can see that we have two paths identified, admin and instructor, and that's fine. That's what we think we have. And then let's go to instructor. And really good. What's nice is we still get this same content blurb. Dan Hall, Bill Qualls, Jane Scholar, and I. But now we get a whole page. So this part at the top is the header. Then we have the nav. Okay, the nav links are dead. Okay, All the links are dead today because we're going to come back and link everything up in a couple of weeks. And then we have our footer. Okay, and if we just take a look at the page source, we can see that it looks pretty good. I mean, it's a pretty well-formed page, and it has all the pieces it's supposed to have. And the template processor has done a really good job of taking the child page and combining it with the parent page and giving us a really complete and attractive HTML page in a pretty modular way. Alright, so that one's done. So that's the first one. That's the first time through. Well, what else do you have to do? Well, we're going to do it for all these. Okay? We're going to do it for instructors, sections, courses, semesters, students, registrations. Okay? Are you going to watch me do them all? No, you're not. You're going to go insane if you do. But I'm going to do the next one, which is we're going to do that by cloning. And I just want to show you what how quickly you can clone pages, templates, views, and URL entries, and you can do it a lot faster than you would have been able to do it if we were doing it from scratch. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is sections. All right, so let's take a look. So what do we need first? Well, we need a template. It's typically where we start. I like to go in a backward chain. You do the template file, then you add the view, then you add the URL, then you're ready to test. Oh, you know what? We didn't test one thing. Good thing I thought about that. Let's go back to views. Okay. And you remember I had a line I had commented out. Okay. This isn't real sophisticated testing, but we're essentially doing testing by exercising the application and inspecting the output. Okay, we're not using any kind of testing framework. And we have to be able to test our list of pages to make sure that they say something sensible if we don't have any of those objects at all. Okay, and instead of fooling with the database to make that happen, what we've done is we have these two versions of the line of code that creates our query set, and we're just going to toggle them on and off. So the first one is currently live. We're going to toggle that into a comment. The second one is currently a comment. We're going to toggle that live. Okay, and make sure that gets saved. And then let's go back and test. So we can leave up, we can go to Instructor. Okay, and look, there are currently no instructors available. Now, is this the prettiest way to do this? I don't know. Pinkham likes it, and it was a pretty straightforward way to code it. So I've decided that it's good enough for us. Okay. All right. Now, how can we toggle that back? We don't want to leave it in that kind of test mode. Well, I'll just go back and toggle the first line back into a live instruction. Toggle the second into being a comment. Make sure you save your code. And then we can just go back to that page. Let me find Firefox. That's what we're using today. And just refresh the page. And that's the beauty of using the development server. Okay, so now we have the instructor list. It's it's completely tested, seems to be working fine. And we've said that we want to create the section list. So let's do that. How did I decide to order these? For some reason, this is the order I put them in the nav long ago. And so when I do things where I have some kind of a piece for each of these tables, I typically do them in this order. That keeps all my code in the same order. Okay, so we've got instructors. We're going to go to sections. So let's close that, and let's say how can we create a section list template? Well, I'm just going to take the instructor list template that we already have, and I'm going to clone it. So I'm going to copy that file. I'm going to paste it into this course info subdirectory. Okay. And of course, we don't want this called instructor list. We want this to be called semester list. Sorry, no, I get this wrong all the time. Section list. Section list. If I could remember what I'm working on, I could be dangerous. Okay, it's called section list, but it doesn't say all this section stuff. Okay, we're still going to use the same base. Instead of a title that says instructor list, we want it to say section list. Okay, and down here in the content that goes in the overall page, same thing for the header. We want that to say section list. Okay. It's important for the names that we're using to pull the data out of the context within the template. It's important to use meaningful names that are geared to the page at hand. So instead of saying for instructor and instructor list, we're going to say for section and section list. Okay. And then down here in the link, instead of rendering the text associated with instructor, we're going to render the text associated with the section. And then now in our error message, we don't want to say that there are no instructors available. We want to say that there are no sections available. Okay. Okay, template done. Let's go to views. All right, that looks good. Let's clone the instructor list into the section list. So I'm just going to copy this. Make sure I get 2 blank lines in between. Okay, I did. And of course, now I've got to change the names here. So of course, it's not instructor list now, it's section list. Okay, section list view. The data structure is going to be called section list. Okay, the objects are going to be from the section class, capital S for class names. Oh, we got a problem here. We don't have that on our import list. Well, here's what we can do. We can just come down here and say we want to add section. And again, I'd like to add the comma even if it's the last one because it's less typing when I add the next one. And this seems to be the style that's used by Django people, and I like it. Okay, now I'm even going to change our code that's in our test commented code. So instead of instructor list, I was going to say section list. Okay. And instead of instructor objects none, which gives us an empty list of objects, we're going to say section objects none. Okay, that's good. Okay, we're going to load the template. It's got to be the right name template. Section list. Okay. Now the next one, this is where we create the dictionary that gets passed in the context. And you'll remember these are popped out by the template by name. And by convention, we use meaningful names in every template, which means we have to have meaningful names put into the context. So the name of the dictionary that's going to be retrieved by is going to be section list. That's the label for the dictionary entry. And then, of course, the data structure that's going to get passed there, the reference to it, is going to be the one that we've already built called section list. Okay? And now we don't have to change the last two because template is a general name. So that's good. Are we done yet? No, not yet, because we haven't wired up the URL part yet. Let's go do that. All right, so we can clone the entry that we made for instructor, and we can add that for section. So we want the path string to say section, and we want it to be a section list view. Okay, and why is that lighting up? Oh, we need to import that. Okay, so let's copy that string, section list view, and let's add it to the list. So I'm going to paste it, put a comma after it, and then I'm going to indent it so that it looks pretty there. So have I done all three parts of the chain? Yep. I've added the entry to urls.py. I've added the view to views.py, and I've created the section list template and connected it up with the parent template base.html. So again, one of the really nice things about the development server is, provided that our code's been saved, which you typically just have to click on a blank line or the last line, which is an empty line, I guess. Now you can click on the URL, and again, sooner or later we're going to pick a page that we're going to get to by default. Okay, so when we just go to the root URL, when we go to the domain name, we're going to route to one of our list pages. We'll decide which one in a future assignment. Okay, but now this is a great opportunity to say, oh, it sees my URL entry for section. That's great. So let's come up here and test that out. If we type in section, do we go to section page? Yeah, we do. We go to the section list. Okay, and one thing that we have not been paying attention to so far, that I didn't call attention to, is because of the title element that we've added to the page head, it's even showing up on the tab. In some browsers, in order to see a tab title, you need at least 2 tabs, but not here in Firefox. It's very accommodating that way. Okay, so these look good, and again, they're dummy links. Not surprised by that. Okay, so that's okay. Let's just test that it knows how to detect when there are no sections. Okay, so let's come back here. Let's go to views. Let's toggle these 2 statements in section list view. So we're calling it with the test version of the query set, the one that's going to be empty. It's the right kind of list and it's empty. It's a list of sections, but it's an empty list of sections. All right, so let's go back and let's say section again. Nope, didn't work. Let's get the root domain there. Section. And there it is. There are currently no sections available. So it detects that very well. And let's toggle the code back out of test mode. And let's go back and find Firefox and refresh it. And there's our sections again. So we've come to the end of the tutorial. Together we've done instructors and sections. I'm leaving 4 of these for you to do. Course, semester, student, registration. Okay, and I suggest you do them in that order. And you do them by following my lead that I did for cloning. And remember, when you test each one, remember to test the test code that to show that you're able to detect a situation where you don't have any of those. Okay, and we simulate that because we want to be able to show that we know how to render it when we have rows in the table, and we know how to render it when the table appears to be empty. So that's it for this. Good luck. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.